This is the Cubot P20, a cheap notched phone, and let's see how good this phone is. So I gotta say that I'm liking notched phones more and more and more, and I know that's not a sentiment that everyone who's watching this video is gonna share, and I completely understand, but for the time being, let's talk about the Cubot P20, and we're gonna start off with the build quality. So here, the Cubot P20 is made of plastic, so it is fairly light. It's not as light as my Smartness Nut Pro 2, but it is light enough considering how big the phone is. It is a 6-inch 18 or 19 or 18.5 by 9 ratio phone, which is actually fairly big. And of course, on the back, you have your dual camera setup, which is protruding out a little bit, as you can see. And then you have your fingerprint sensor that is indented, and then you have your Cubot logo at the bottom. And of course, it also feels pretty decent in the hand, and the curves on the edges, they're not super curved, but they're okay, and it feels fairly comfortable in the hand. It's not super good, but it's definitely good enough. So looking at the bezels here, I gotta say that the bezels here they're good, but they're not the smallest I've ever seen. So you have your notch, which is a fairly small notch, and I like it because I've seen other phones, for example, the Yumi Digi Z2, which has a fairly big notch that comes pretty much all the way to here and to here. So it leaves basically no space for your icons. Basically, you have enough space for your Wi-Fi, your SIM, and your battery, and then just enough for the clock here. And if it's double digits, it's going to be a lot less. But this is good because there's space for more icons on the left side. Whoops, left side and the right side also. And of course, at the bottom, you have a fairly big bezel. I was hoping for something that's smaller, but then we'll have to settle for that. And on the sides, we have decent bezels, but they're actually not too small either. The phone here doesn't feel super good quality. It feels good enough, but that's about the best this thing can do. So it's definitely not metal. It's definitely not premium, but it'll pass. So of course, we have a pretty decent display here. It's a 1080p IPS display with a resolution of about 2160 by 1080, but it's not exactly that because you do have a notch on both sides. If you're talking about the actual quality of the display itself, you'll see that the colors, the saturation, the crispness, they're all very, very good. I'm very surprised by that. The Cubot P20 does have a decent display, especially considering the rest of the specs. It's only an MTK 6750, so I'm surprised the display here is, in my opinion, it's better than what this phone should be with an MTK 6750. Look at the color saturation on that frog. It's so deep, it's so rich, and it just looks very, very good. That's something I do appreciate, and I really think this screen will satisfy pretty much anybody except for the toughest reviewer out there. But apart from that guy, which is actually not me, I'm actually fine with the screen. But if the toughest reviewer out there, he's probably going to find an issue with this display. Touch sensitivity is great also, absolutely no problems there. So that is a good thing also. So when you're talking audio quality, I'm surprised, again, pleasantly surprised that the audio quality here is actually decent. It's not super duper good, but it's also fairly, it's actually not bad. Of course, you're lacking bass, but apart from that, there's really not much else that is lacking in this phone. It's fairly crisp, it's fairly clear. There's decent mids and highs, so that's actually good. And of course, the audio volume is very good also. Very, very surprised by how loud this speaker can go. So have a listen for yourself. Alright, talking next about battery life, it's to be expected that the battery life here is not going to be very good because of the MTK 6750, but Cubot again pulled a hat trick, or a trick out of their hat, with very good standby, which is actually very, very decent. However, of course, if you're using the phone and the screen is on, then the power consumption goes way up because the MTK 6750 actually isn't very good, which is very sad. If you're looking at standby battery life, you're looking at around 0.5% per hour, which is actually very, very good for the MTK 6750. And I was able to get around 5 hours of screen on time with the 4,000 milliamp hour battery, which really isn't great, but it's on par with what other MTK 6750 phones can actually achieve, so that is to be expected. But standby battery life, Cubot did a fairly good job optimizing that there. And of course, here we have Android 8.0 Oreo with a very nice stock launcher. Swipe up to access your app drawer, swipe left for Google Now. And I just want to show you Google Now is a tiny bit laggy. Here, watch when I swipe and I swipe this way. You can see that there's a tiny bit of hiccup and lag, which is not, it is noticeable, but it goes away after a while. Well, it comes back sometimes as well. So there's that does happen. It's not super duper smooth, and that is the fault of the MTK 6750 because that is an older processor, but it still performs admirably well. It's completely stock Android, so you do not have to worry. And there are also a bevy of software optimizations that you can use to customize your phone. You can go into fingerprint, and you can have a lot of options to see what you can do with the fingerprint sensor itself. You can also hide the bar here to make it a full screen device, and it looks very good. Too bad there is no swipe up for home, multitasking, and back like other phones like the Smartest Not Pro 2, and I like the gesture control, but this one does not have it yet. I'm not sure if they'll ever implement it, but for now there isn't that. So let's open something like Chrome, and you can see that was basically instantaneous. It's of course a tiny bit slower than the Snapdragon 845, but it's basically on par with the Snapdragon 660, my Smartest Not Pro 2, which is very, very impressive. And we'll open something like Google Play Music, and this one is taking a little bit longer. You can see that took about 1 second. It's respectable, but it's definitely not lightning fast. Google Play actually worked fairly well in launching it to make sure it launched fast, and that was actually not bad. I'll put something else like, let's say, Manga Master. This one is usually an app that opens up very, very fast, and this one, it did open very fast as well, so that's pretty good. Finally, let's open a game and see how fast that opens. This is, of course, a light game, so that is good, and we'll see. That one took a little bit of time, so there's that to contend with. Let's talk about gaming. In terms of games, I tried PUBG on this, and it definitely did not work very well. The MTK 6750 is definitely not, it's not powerful enough for you to play an intense game like that. I even tried Modern Combat, and for some reason, it wasn't smooth at all, which is fairly surprising. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe it's a 1080p screen, but still, you are able to play, light games like this game fairly well, so that's actually good. But apart from light games, if you want to play heavy games, you're not going to be able to play the best in the market. So that is sad, but we'll have to make do with something like the MTK 6750. All right, let's talk fingerprint sensor. Tap. That was about a second, so that wasn't too fast, but it's it's respectable enough. I think it's barely fast enough for me to use it in real life. It is still a little bit slow. It's faster than the Yumi Digi Z2. Don't get me wrong. So yeah, you can see that's about, actually, you know what? It's less than a second. It's maybe like 0.7 seconds, 0.8 seconds, but still, it's not very fast compared to the instantaneousness in the Smartest Not Pro 2 and the Xiaomi Mi Note 3. Last but not least, let's look at Treble Check, and here we have Project Treble supported, but seamless system updates are not supported because you do not have the A/B partitions here. And now let's take a look at the network bands here. Let's look at the band mode. And here you see that we have 2G, which is useless to many people. 3G connectivity is not good. You have a 900 and 2000, which means that if you are anywhere in the USA or Canada, it's not going to work. Europe still works, so that's fine. You guys can rest easy. LTE bands is also pretty bad. You got 1, 3, 7, 8, 20, and that's pretty much it. So that means that if you are anywhere in the USA, it's not going to work. If you are in Canada and you are on Rogers, it's going to work. But if you are on Bell, it's going to work, but you're not going to be able to get phone calls. Same thing with Telus. So basically, Rogers is the only one that's kind of compatible with this, and not even fully compatible with this either. I was able to get 4G speeds on this phone, and I was able to get and receive phone calls fairly easily. So that's really no problem at all. Wi-Fi, Bluetooth works well, but GPS, of course, takes a long time for you to get a lock. And it also, when you reopen the Maps app like Google Maps, it will take a long time to acquire your current location and update it properly. All right, let's take a look at the camera on the Cubot P20. And I gotta say that, again, Cubot did a pretty good job with the camera. I will tell you about the problems later, but I will tell you about the quality of the back-facing camera first. And as you can see, the detail on that the camera is able to capture is actually very good, and I'm actually really surprised. Well, not surprised anymore, as I am pleased with the detail in the photo. You can see that there is ample detail in the leaves that are in focus, and there's quite a lot of detail as well in the berry. So that's actually very good, and I really like it. Color saturation is also pretty good. There is a decent amount of color saturation. It looks good. It looks decent, and I think that if you take photos in good lighting conditions, and you're going to be able to take some very, very decent photos. We have some HDR here, and the HDR mode here works sometimes, not all the time. So for example, take a look at this photo. It's super dark. HDR mode, bam, it looks very good. So that's nice. But the problem with that I have with that is that the camera should have compensated for that in the first place. So basically what I'm trying to say is that it should have taken the HDR shot in the first place, because like a lot of cameras are doing that already, even not in their HDR mode. So so the non-HDR mode is basically not as good as it should be, and the HDR mode brings it up to par. There are other situations where you can use the HDR mode in situations where it doesn't require HDR mode, and it basically changes the overall tone of the photo. For example, look at the picture of this with the tree. It looks pretty normal, doesn't need HDR. You turn HDR on, and bam, you get a fairly dramatic looking photo with some dark cloud, and it looks like it's going to rain. So it can change the tone of the photo for you. Not sure everyone is going to like it, but in some situations, I think it looks pretty decent. There are a couple of problems with this though, and I will give you 3 problems here. The first is a laggy camera app. So when you tap on the photo button, it takes approximately 1.5 seconds for the camera to actually snap the photo itself, which actually makes it very annoying, because that really messes with your timing and you can't really get photos that you want. And that is a big problem. It's a software problem, so it probably should be fixed ASAP. The next problem here is the problem with the movement. If you have something that moves too fast, then you start getting blurry photos. That's a pretty normal problem to have in many of these cheaper phones, but there's that. And then finally, there's also grain in photos that are present even in good lighting conditions, and that happens most often in my view when you turn on HDR and you can look at the sky, and you'll see that there is quite a bit of grain, which is fairly it doesn't look good. The front-facing camera is pretty average, and finally the video quality here is 1080p, and it's average 1080p. It's not even good 1080p, so nothing to really write home about that there. So there you have it. That was the Cubot P20. There were ups and downs definitely in this phone. It is a okay phone, especially if you're considering the specifications. It's definitely not a high-end phone. It's MTK 6750. It's not very high-end. In fact, it's decidedly low-end. But I gotta be honest, it looks like a very nice phone, because if you look at the notch, especially if you are a notch guy, it looks good. And the bezels around the screen are, they're not too big, but they're also not too small either. This is basically a good-looking low-end phone. And the biggest problem I have with this phone here is the price. So looking at prices on AliExpress and GearBest and other places like that, you're looking at around $190. And that is a very high price to pay for a phone like this, when you can get a Redmi Note 5 Pro for $170. Or if you want, I've even seen Xiaomi Mi Note 3s with a Snapdragon 660 for $195 on sale. So this phone at $190 is definitely not a good deal. So if you find this phone cheaper, let's say $120, $130, yeah, this is a good phone for the price at least, especially considering how nice it looks. And of course, you always pay a price for aesthetics and for beauty, and you definitely pay that here as well. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. Be sure to hit the little notification button to make sure you're notified of any of the latest videos that come out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.